Everything that's important to us as humans come from storytelling. And the only way in which we are able to expand insight, expand wisdom, expand our humanity, expand you know, our sensitivity to each other, expand tolerance and all those values that are going to actually make our world a better place. The only way we can't get that done is if we expand the consciousness of the storytellers. And it's been the honor of my life to actually be able to work with young filmmakers, young storytellers at the Multichoice Talent Factory, and to have the support of Henley, especially Dr. Puleng, has been incredibly valuable. Thank you so much to the board and the staff and the leadership of Henley. What I want to talk about today is basically something that is an ongoing conversation that I'm having with storytellers who I mentor and with whom I exchange ideas. And I thought, you know, when I was asked what I would love to talk about, because it's something that's really a response to where we all are, I immediately said, look, let me talk about Pukka. And what's Pukka? I mean, Pukka is just a genuineness, a realness, a connection to who you are, where you come from, where is the anchor of the things that you do. It's where you go when you meditate. It's really about a certain vulnerability that comes through in your work. And for us in the space of storytelling, there is nothing so important now as to understand what Pukka means and how it impacts everything that we do, because we have to understand that storytelling's greatest value is that it helps the community to find meaning. And there's not a time in history like this where everyone is in a search for meaning. Every other webinar that's been going on for the last 3 months would say the same thing. You know, COVID-19 is a reset. It's an opportunity for nations and companies and people and leaders to rethink everything. And for me, as a storyteller, what does that say? In storytelling, there is something we call the power of the decisive moment. And the decisive moment, for those who tell stories or read stories, and if you enjoy the novel, you would understand this. The idea that all storytelling comes in 3 acts. Normally, the act 1 ends with an inciting incident, something that, you know, takes a world that is in order and puts it into disorder. And then obviously, you know, act 2 is how our character reacts to this, and how, you know, this disorder or this disconnect or this world has turned upside down, the tension heightens. And then, of course, you know, the man is brought to a place of choice. And what feeds that choice is usually not what is happening around him, but what is happening inside of him, which is why we're able to consider storytelling and filmmaking as a character's journey, as, you know, a journey of change. It's not a great story if the character doesn't change from act 1 to act 3. And the heart of that is the fact that the character has a decision to make. And in a way, all of us as storytellers, all of us need to understand how this decisive moment works, because we have a decisive moment forced upon us. I always tell folks that, you know, the characters in a movie or a story can create a decisive moment, or they can stumble into one, or one can happen to them. COVID-19 for all of us, whether it be nations, people, people, families, individuals. COVID-19 has happened to us. It just, you know, it's a decisive moment that we have to do three things immediately. And these are the three things that leads us to a place demanding Pukka. It leads us to a place where it demands for us to be genuine, to be real, to look deep inside ourselves, to find a response. And for me as a storyteller and for my students that I exchange these thoughts with, there's nothing that's going to be more key, not just to creating stories, but key to people understanding how these stories impact them and how they, in fact, understand the world around them itself. The three things about decisive moments, as we know in cinema, is that you first of all must recognize the moment. And of course, you know, COVID-19, you'll recognize, but things are not the same. They're not as simple as they used to be. We're almost caged in, we can't travel. During the isolation, we couldn't go anywhere. It is a moment that we have to recognize as a turning moment, and we have. All of us have called it the reset. We have called it an opportunity, you know, so we can tick that box. We've also got to a place where we have to, secondly, embrace that moment. And I think we all have kind of come to it. We've all embraced the idea that, you know, business and life and family, and we might have to rely on technology for a lot of this. We've come to embrace, you know, the concept of, you know, close but far. We've come to embrace the idea of, you know, cleanliness, not just next to godliness, but to share survival. So there is a way in which we've also sort of ticked that box. Where we are now, as all of us are beginning to understand what has happened with the first peak of the impact of COVID-19, and with nations now beginning to look at the possibility of opening up again, is the third thing, which is how do we activate a shift? Activating the shift is where I think Pukka becomes so much more important, not just for creative people, not just for storytellers, but also for innovators, for leaders. And at a time like this, someone said to me last week that there is nothing more important, no leadership framework is more important in a crisis than self-leadership. And you cannot lead the self that you don't know. So effectively, I thought it was brilliant, because what he's saying is everything that would allow those who survive these times to be able to create, to innovate, to be able to expand on what they do and to bring value to the table in whatever communities that they exist, and hopefully to foster prosperity, would be a keen understanding of who they are, and out of who they are, to find a meaning to these times that would allow them to be able to drive their ambitions at a time like this. So I thought I would talk about three important things that I have been thinking about in this time that is basically fueled, you know, by Pukka at a time like this. The first one, obviously, is the concept of impermanence. The idea that suddenly everyone understands vulnerability, not conceptually, but practically. In the last 3-4 months since March, I have lost 4 people incredibly close to me. My brother-in-law has passed. He was a medical doctor and one of those who were at the forefront of responding to the COVID crisis in Lagos. And he was the sort of guy who laughed a lot, made fun of I mean, he was the sort of guy that made you calm in the midst of crisis. When you're sick, he's the one that makes the jokes. And when he is sick, he was making jokes. As far as I heard, he was still telling jokes a couple of days about how, you know, he was going to sort this out. It was nothing at all. And imagine my shock when 2 days later, I'm told that he's dead, he's passed on. There is a certain disbelief and a certain suspension of reality that comes with it because of how quick, how unexpected it is. The same has happened to a very close friend of 20 years, to whom I was a best man when he married, and to face his wife and know that, you know, he had diabetes and that pre-existing condition quickened his demise, all within a couple of days. And just last week, we buried a very influential professor of medicine who is actually an elder brother to a very close friend of mine, but he'd become a mentor to me as well. He was such a wonderful, wonderful gentleman who gave and had so many people relying on him. And for him to be taken so quickly, the impermanence of the time is something that I think we all are needing to process, and to process from the perspective of understanding the vulnerability in the dynamics of power. So whether you're a boss, a teacher, a leader, an idea generator, an innovator, impermanence is an argument against you know, being slow to actualize anything. You know, being what's that word I'm trying to look for? Impermanence is an understanding that recognizes that in a time like this, ideas love speed. Ideas love speed. There's so much that's going on that it's all very nuanced now, because everything and everyone is suddenly vulnerable. And concepts of, you know, life and death and prosperity and poverty and work culture and what you deserve, what you don't deserve, becomes stuff that you really have zero guarantees about. And I think that's, for me, the first thing that I intend to reflect in the stories of this time that I tell. The second, obviously, is empathy, and the idea that in many ways, everything is nuanced now. What we know about people, about religion, about science, about everything is nuanced. There's a way in which all of us who have been in leadership positions or in a place where we are having to lead a process or to create, have to understand that right now there is an emotionality to everything. There is a way, there is a space in everybody's mind where there is a melancholy. There is, I don't want to call it a fear, because not everybody actually is afraid to die, but everybody understands that coming from an understanding or an awareness of impermanence, there is a sensitivity to the idea that people are very, very vulnerable. It just means that right now, that we must value people above money. We must value people above, you know, targets and goals and performance indicators. Must embrace empathy. W.S. Gilbert said it isn't so much what is on the table that matters, but what's on the chair. There's going to have to be a way in which we not only connect with people as a way to drive them to do things, we have to be able to connect with them from a place of why they are needing to do it, or why they need to achieve, or why they need to deliver, but also to understand that, you know, they may need to find their way through how this is done. Empathy is no longer a concept or an idea It is now the reality of the workspace. It is now the reality of the dynamics of relationship between people in a time like this, because guess what? The people are very vulnerable. The final thing is that in finding meaning, people are going to be having to think through, you know, and make choices that are unusual. Now they have to think about the difference between being successful and being significant, because impermanence means that you need to figure out why you're here quickly, and you need to pursue why you're here, and you need to do so in a community of people who drive that agenda that leaves something of you behind that is bigger than money, that is bigger than position, that is bigger than. So excellence will be about how you impact your world now, not just about money. Networks will become very important. I think that's something that everyone used to understand as something you do to simply transact. But networks will be more important now, simply because leadership and how you craft your place in the world leadership is going to be more transformative now than transactional. And so there is a way in which, you know, even for you as a person, the most important thing in this crisis, as I said earlier, becomes your own self leadership. I think, you know, those three things for me become what I consider the drivers of going inside of you and finding what the powers of this decisive moment demand of you. It demands of you authenticity. It demands of you a passion that is beyond just doing things. I think too many people, someone said that, you know, we've all spent too much time in our lives impersonating the people that we think people want us to be. That sense of what is your passion? What is it that actually, not just that you do well, but you do and brings you meaning beyond just being successful. And then finally, purpose. You know, those three things I think are what I think is the important conversation that everyone needs to have, whether you're a storyteller in the creative business or you're a business person who's needing to be creative, to be innovative, not just in leadership, but also in creating value, in resources, in connecting with consumers, with viewers, with whatever. At the heart of excellence in the new world, as we embrace, you know, this decisive moment, would be up and above all our understanding of humanity, and obviously our acceptance that, you know, it's going to continue to take a village to raise a child. So thank you very much. I'm really grateful once again to be able to share these thoughts with you.
Hey, Femi, thanks so much. I'm going to read a quote of yours that I wrote down, I think, at the Georgia Hotel, and that was, you said something to the effect of, today the only currency you have is how good you are at storytelling, which I think is an enormously profound statement, and still highly valuable, and more valuable right now than ever, in fact. And that could be storytelling you tell the world, or the story you tell yourself. I guess equally important. That was an amazing set of insights, and I'm going to encourage the attendees to reach out to you with some questions, And if you good for that, if we could spend a few minutes just bouncing some ideas back and forth, that'd be fantastic. Mama, are you there? Do you have access to any of the Q&A? Are there any questions coming in?
Barry, not yet, but I have a question, because it's something that I'm personally struggling with, in that the world demands so much of us, you know, to be productive beings and to just produce certain outputs, and we need to put bread on the table, etc. And my question is, how do you find meaning in trying to balance needing to eat and writing your story as a human being on this earth? Because you shared the other day that at the end of it all, what will be left of our blueprint on earth is a story, you know, the story that people tell at your funeral, or just in conversations that they have. So how do you find that sweet spot, or that balance, you know, of needing to do what you have to do because you have to make ends meet, but also just staying authentic to yourself and really crafting a life of meaning?
Well, I think, you know, one of the things that, well, something important you said is that when you do pass on, I talked about the idea of impermanence and the idea that everyone is thinking more and more now about what happens when I go, what's the story. The great thing about it is we get to actually write the story. And for me, it's a question of simply finding the consciousness to do what those who are storytellers do. Find what are your value. What are the things that give your life meaning? Whatever it is that gives your life meaning impacts others in ways that even you yourself cannot begin to understand. And obviously, we're talking here about also embracing those things that grow you as a valuable human. That's very important. And then the values that you carry as a character builds up something that connects to your purpose, to the things that give your life meaning. Whatever gives your life meaning impacts others, because you come into contact with people at every turn. I'm saying all of this to say you do not need to make money to bring meaning to people's lives. One of the things that I find interesting is there are people that I remember when I was in college in Bozeman, Montana. I was a 17-year-old kid in this place where it's sometimes 20 degrees below zero. And believe me, as a student, I was out of pocket. I was living in an apartment in a basement of someone who had never seen a Black person until I came along. And I remember a week where I had no money and hadn't eaten for a couple of days. And one day I come out of my apartment and this lady had left a bag of groceries on my steps. And that's 30 years ago. I still think about it constantly when I do things for people, and I make sure I don't have a sense of I need them to appreciate it, because she left the bag there and disappeared. And I think it's so important that we understand that what really makes for human connections are really not about money. They're just about a consciousness. And now is a time when I believe whatever it is that you do for a living, there are many hours in the day for you to also do stuff that connect with people. Human capital will be far more important in this new world that we go in.
Mama, anything in response? Are you distilling?
Yeah, I'm distilling. I guess the most important thing is just to find meaning in every little thing that we do, and just be conscious about how you craft your winters and your summers, basically, you know. So yeah, thank you. Joseph asked a very interesting question. Joseph, would you like to speak? We can allow you to speak if you would like to. You can speak if you'd like to ask a question, Joseph.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I mean, and thanks to Femi and whatever you shared with us, it was very interesting. Then the idea that you're sharing with us, that of impermanency. I mean, I have a child who's got anxiety and depression, and they're so reliant on me. And now and then I find it difficult to let them know that I'm not here forever, and sooner or later they need to take their own independence. So how do you convey to such a sensitive child a message of saying, look here, I'm not here forever, and the idea of impermanence, how do I then translate that to a child?
Well, first of all, you need to know that I'm actually not a trained psychologist, so I'm just going to offer you what I think I read as a storyteller. I don't think you ever have to communicate that to anyone. I'm more so to someone who's dealing with a health condition. We're all naturally well aware of it because we're surrounded by news, we're surrounded by information, we're surrounded by the fears of everyone around. It's palpable. I think everyone kind of understands that, more and more. And I bring that up simply from the perspective of those of us who procrastinate, those of us who have ideas and thoughts and things and we want to do or innovate, or a book you want to write, or someone you want to visit. Or it's that place in time where all of this are triggers of storytelling down the road. In the next 20 years, most of the stories that will be told of this time would actually draw from these concepts of relational psychology that I am talking about. I think, it's counterproductive to tell anyone, I might die tomorrow. Because what you do is create a different set of problems. I do think, however, that, the second point about empathy is also critical. One of the books that I'm forever grateful to Henley for giving me is I believe it's called Time to Think by Nancy Klein. I found it to be so powerful to have every single one of my students read it. It's about how we are able to build people just by listening better, simply by letting them do, letting them understand that we're trying to hear both the said and the unsaid, and that we're respecting the moment with them in such a way that even if they think of impermanence, there is a healing that is going on in the moment. And I think that's really what's key. I don't think you must understand impermanence separately from empathy, because then your capacity to impact becomes nil.
Thank you so much.
I see a message from Paul. Paul Orajiaka is our chapter head in Lagos. So he's in your neighborhood, Femi. Let's get Paul on to, he's got a great question. Momo, can we get Paul live? If he just unmutes his mic, he can probably ask himself, right?
Yeah, Paul can unmute.
Paul, we waiting for you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you perfectly.
Femi, bro, how are you?
Hi, Paul. How are you?
Lovely, man. I've been enjoying the topic today. I was just telling Barry that we know how we roll in Nigeria. So, nice conversation. All right.
Thank you.
So, I was going to ask my question is, there's this general perception that says you do not blow your own trumpet, So, the question is, how do you now strike that balance so that you can tell your story, but at the same time being humble, being modest, and people are not having that feel that he's just blowing his own trumpet. So this is what I want to know. Where do you draw that balance?
I'm not sure that, it's not the sort of time where anyone really needs to worry about, because we're all blowing. Social media is one big trumpet everyone blows every day. I mean, as long as there's LinkedIn, do you know anyone who manages to write a paragraph that makes sense, that doesn't suddenly, put it on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and email it to people? I do think it's important to embrace our win. When we win, you must embrace your win. It's important to do that because it's also a way to actualize your own being. I think it's only dangerous when blowing your horn is about, competition, is about showing off someone else. For me, if what you have achieved brings value to your community, if it brings value to you, if it brings value to those who follow you on social media, I think it's fine. But I think it's also about what is quantifiable in terms of value. We used to think it's the bottom line. We used to think it's the numbers, how much you're selling stuff. We used to think it's about, how well you understand maybe the marketing of things. But I also think it's now also going to be how you relate, how you lead, how do you transform, not just transact. And I think, those who are going to be in a position to decide leadership on teams are going to find these very critical. Part of understanding empathy is simply not doing stuff in your face just to show people off. But if it's about value, if it's about, quantifiable things, if it's about innovation and advancement, I don't see a problem in actually, owning, your win. Just you can be, as I always say, humility is not thinking less of yourself, as people would say, is thinking about yourself less. And empathy sort of takes care of all of that, in that, you can put the value of what you've achieved out there without entirely demanding, a chorus of how great thou art.
Great stuff. How about Lebo? Do you want to go live, unmute yourself, and ask away?
Hi, Uncle Femi.
Hi, Lebo.
How are you?
Well, welcome home.
I'm stalking you. Basically, I just wanted to, for me, it's an issue of constantly being bombarded with negative world reports. And it's not really that easy to switch off, especially in my career. I have to stay abreast of unfolding events. So I want to find out from you, how do you switch off? Do you have any tips?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, when COVID came, I was buried. I had to deal with kids who needed to go. We needed to make sure they were safely back to their homes. I was doing a TV series that needed to conclude somehow, and we had several episodes on that wasn't done. And for a while there, it just seemed to be one thing after the other, and sometimes a lot of it is not great news. But I find that really for every incoming information, and this is where I think Pukka is such an interesting thing, that you can actually find the time to go into yourself and reinvent the incoming messaging. I think that's really very important. And, they say some people are, naturally optimistic, some people are naturally pessimistic. I don't think it's a natural thing. I think it's a choice you have to make. And in choosing, I find that in every news, good or bad, there is always that little margin of it that is actually a bit of both. And so for me, I also try to drive my energy to whatever is going to actually drive me forward. And that usually is also shutting down sometimes social media. It's also being selective about shutting down those who are very proficient or with bad news. You have those guys who make sure that if you haven't heard the bad news, they'll tag you on all your social media platforms. You wanna get away from those. But that is not to escape reality. The reality of what's on ground is often also part of all of this, that you're able to recognize the moment, embrace it, so that you actually know that this is actually a change moment, and it is a decisive moment. You can't vacillate, you can't delay. Make a decision and focus on how you're going to activate a shift. But I know that there is no bad news that's permanent. There's always a margin for it to turn around.
Yeah, that really, that helps. I've been all off social media except Twitter for 2 weeks. And for me, I've been able to focus because of that. And I really appreciate your suggestion and your input. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Lebo. Mamo, do you have anybody else that on your radar that wants to ask a question?
Yeah, Zitulele has a very interesting one. Zitulele, we've allowed you to speak. Would you like to contribute?
Hi, thank you so much. Can you guys hear me?
Thank you.
Yes, you can just raise your voice a bit, but yeah.
Okay, so I'm just using headphones here. So thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for such a great topic in the platform. It's really informative for us. I think my question just touches base on how do we enhance the capabilities of us as Africans to tell our stories beyond the current limitations within Africa. One is thinking of the current poverty situation that we foresee to be forever growing within African space. Looking at the fact that we owe it to the next generation to teach them or to show them the importance of storytelling, being able to sustain or being able to create what you call a life for themselves. So how do we enhance it? How do we take it beyond all of these current limitations, factoring also the current pandemic that we find ourselves in, as to say, how then do we come out stronger from this, but purely in a way that we're able to enhance storytelling within Africa? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. One of the things that I hadn't maybe spoken more deeply about is the idea that, in being genuine, in being real, in finding that in a space to be honest and to come to all these tools that allow us to push forward at a time like this, is also a connection to our reality. There is a way in which the stories of our culture, the things that actually were our strengths, are the things that in the course of history and colonialism and, the idea of slavery and all those issues, we've sort of lost connection to a set of principles of community, a set of principles of humanity that actually built our civilizations as Africans hundreds of years before those who came. And it connects to a lot of things. It connects to our environment. It connects to how we embrace the land, how we embrace who we are. And a lot of these things are embedded in our languages our ways of life, all of which in modernity we've tended to sort of abandon. And in trying to embrace cultures and realities that are not indigenous to us, there are many ways in which we have been not so genuine, and therefore our kids are in a space where their story is a bit all over the place. There is a sense in which their story is actually lacking a genuineness, lacking a reality. There is a way in which, like I said, they are born impersonating a certain culture, not embracing their own culture. And I say that from a space of a guy who was born and bred in Nigeria, but from 16, went to school abroad. And, somehow when I came back, I found that whilst I was trying to re-embrace culturally who I am as a Yoruba man, everybody here was trying or were defining what it meant to be civilized as ability to transform into something that they were not. And I think with kids, with children, it's important that we are able to help them embrace the totality of who they are. Yes, they live in a time when, to be universal, to be international is important, because you live in a world where walls are down and you're not living in a hole, everything is interconnected. But at the same time, the only originality they bring to the table is who they are as who they are. And so when they become a musician that's trying to be more Michael Jackson than Michael Jackson, there is a lack of authenticity, a lack of Pukka in their very essence. And so it's hard for them to actually, in my opinion, to get to the best of themselves. Because if their own story is not quite authentic, it's impossible for them to create authentic stories that will keep the world itself transfixed, and where the world learns something new through their eyes.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Femi. We probably got time for one more question, and then we need to start wrapping up. Is there anybody else, Mama?
Well, we don't have any further questions in the chat.
Okay, well, what I suggest we do is we start winding down. Femi, thanks so much. It was just that was a magnificent hour spent. There were so many things that popped out of what you were saying of huge relevance to me that I ran out of paper taking notes about 3/4 of the way through, which is a good sign. But I loved the concept of impermanence, and the fact that this pandemic situation has just amplified that hugely, and the concept of ideas loving speed. That's very powerful for me. I also loved what you were talking about with authenticity and what could be potentially called, I guess, cultural authenticity, and which is another way of saying Pukka, so those are all concepts that have deep resonance with me. So just thought I'd say thanks, and from my point of view, those are huge. I loved what you said about disorder and reorder right up front, which would align to dissonance and resonance from a musical point of view, and those are just deeply centering concepts, and actually equally important. There's not a good guy and a bad guy in dissonance and resonance, or disorder and reorder. So thanks for all of that. I'd love to introduce John Foster Pedley, the Dean of Henley Africa, who you've met a bunch of times, Femi. Is John on board with us? John, are you there? Do you want to say hi?
Absolutely. Hey. Honored to have
Femi.
you here, John. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, I'm good. Good to see you too. I'm so sorry I missed your show. In fact, what we were doing, we had another gig. We were exploring virtual reality with virtual reality headsets and sort of sussing out how to do immersion. So we're going to do cameras in Nigeria, and we're going to look around everywhere, and we're going to share that with everybody. And we'll talk to you more about that. But I'm really sorry I missed it. I mean, just picking up what I've heard, it's really interesting to me. I've always been long time fascinated by the invisible strategies of creativity. I mean, often to the sort of world of order and logistics and accounting and corporations where things are about, you know, scalability and reliability. There's a way of looking at things. And when I look at the world of the creative, it looks like a random, crazy, dangerous world full of wild people who are self-indulgent and mad. And what of course is wrong is that within there you've got, it's fed with brilliantly intelligent people who understand to take a mystery, which they don't know what it is, and start to express it and bring it together in some sort of sense, things that we can't properly explain, but they get patterns, they get dimensions, they get sort of spectra of things. So it's not like either or, everything's it's on a dilemma or with a tension. And you live in that world of and both all the time and start to make sense of these sort of warring and balancing energies. And from that sort of really amorphous idea comes, you know, more concrete ideas or ways of expression. And from those ways of sense making become things that people start to experiment with. And then from when they start experimenting, then people start liking it and it creates value, and then people start buying it. And then then at that point, the thing gathers momentum and is shifted over to the world of accountants. So the accountancy world looks like a world of sort of straight-laced suits who can't think and have to have a menu, you know, just to tie up their shoelaces, you know, or a 6-step method. And the other world looks like a wild one. Of course, neither is true. What you've got in there is just what we've been trained to see. And I love this idea of trying to find sense and meaning through stories, imagery, understanding that within this invisible strategy of creativity, there are disciplines and processes and repetitions, hard things to learn to make it very reliable to be creative. And that's, again, we're surrounded with Mamo and Barry and you yourself, all masters in this world. And it's very much part of what we're exploring in Henley and what fascinates me about when we start recreating a world after COVID or bouncing up or reimagining what Africa truly is, not what, you know, these are, whose idea is this? What is this future? We don't know, but it's going to emerge from these ideas. So I'm really sorry I missed it. And I hope you'll come and do it again. And thank you to everyone who came to listen. Really very cool to be able to connect across Africa like this. I think it's really exciting. So let's do a lot more of it. And we'll pump lots of energy into it. So thank you for talking and thank you for being there.
Thank you, John. Thank you. It's great to see you again. And thank you, Barry. Thank you, Mamo.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. We'll see you again. We're gonna come after you again for another one of these. So so watch this space, everybody.
My pleasure. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Femi.
All right.
And,
thanks so much, Femi. Thank you.
So we'll be back with another third Wednesdays on the 16th of September. It'll be our next session. Hope you've enjoyed the new look and the new feel. Mama, what do you think? Should we play out with a little reprise closer of the Village Jams?
Yes, indeed.
Surprise,
yes,
John.
Nice jam setup. So I'm just going to. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
You too can sing Waka Waka, with or without you. With or without you, oh, I can't live. With or without you. Samina mina, to the east, Samina mina, to the west. Let's hear you sing. Samina mina, Samina mina. It's time for Africa.